Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan Duquette. I'm with California Relief. I'm the Education and Communications Program Manager, and welcome to Learn Over Lunch with Clean Green Pomona. We started Learn Over Lunch sessions back in 2020 as a way to provide network peer-to-peer learning opportunities. And it's a really great chance to meet and connect with other network members across the state, to share best practices and to learn from each other. We host Learn Over Lunch on select Wednesdays throughout the year, and you can learn more about our upcoming scheduled sessions by visiting our website, californiarelief.org/LOL. Today, I have the honor and the privilege of introducing you to Kyle Brown, who serves on Clean and Green Pomona's Board of Directors as their Treasurer and Secretary. He is also a professor of landscape architecture at Cal Poly Pomona, and he's going to be sharing today about Clean and Green Pomona's approach to addressing environmental inequities. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle. Thank you, Kyle, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, California Relief, for inviting me. And thank you all for choosing to have lunch on a beautiful day inside looking at your computer. So I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen here. And let's see if I can get that in present. You all see that in presentation mode? Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, I am Kyle Brown. I'm with an organization called Clean and Green Pomona in Pomona, California. I'm going to be showing you some of the work that we do in a variety of advocacy and action around environmental issues. Tree planting is really only a small part of what we do in terms of our organization. And so I'm going to give you kind of that overview, in particular focus on the idea of advocacy and influencing policy, particularly at the local level. You can see our website there, cleangreenpomona.org. I'm going to be showing some and talking about some publications we've got. All of that stuff's on our website if you're interested in taking a look at that. So just, I know we got some folks, some neighbors in the audience, but for folks that aren't familiar, Pomona is on the eastern edge of Los Angeles County. It's the 7th largest city in Los Angeles County, with about 151,000 people, largely Latino population, tends to be a little bit younger, but also have higher rates of poverty, lower median household incomes, and lower educational attainment when you compare it to state or county averages. And we also have a significant population that has the potential to be linguistically isolated, as about a quarter of the population speaks English less than very well. So all of these represent, some interesting challenges, social challenges for the city of Pomona. In addition, residents within our community are really exposed to significant pollution burdens from regional as well as local sources. One of the things I've noticed is a common pattern in the United States is that uses that nobody wants near them, they tend to put on the borders of counties and on the borders of cities. And us being on the border of Los Angeles County, we have our share of those kind of unwanted land uses that present significant pollution challenges. And then also being really at the gateway to the Inland Empire, we know certainly the air quality issues and other issues associated with the Inland Empire, and we're impacted by those as well. And this image from Cal EnviroScreen really illustrates the situation in Pomona. We have 31 census tracts in the city, and 23 of those are in the 75th percentile or higher in the latest Cal EnviroScreen. And you can see just by the amount of oranges and red, even the ones that aren't necessarily in that top 25% are probably in the top 30%, 35%. So some significant environmental challenges within our community. So our organization, we started back in 2011. And we were formed originally by leaders from a group that's now known as the Inland Community Organizing Network, or ICON, as well as some other community members. And we really grew out of an effort that happened around 2010 an effort within the city of Pomona to resist the siting of a regional waste transfer station in the southeastern part of our city, one of the most impacted parts of our city in terms of pollution and in terms of some of those demographic challenges that I talked about. That effort was unsuccessful. That waste transfer station was built and is in operation today. However, some of the things, there was a significant awakening that took place, I would argue, within the city of Pomona during that time period. And one of the things that resulted was Clean Green Pomona formed. So some of the folks who were leading that resistance effort were really interested in thinking about how they could get out in front of these kinds of issues and address some of the environmental injustices that they perceived as happening. And so, since 2011, we've really been a leading advocate on health, safety, and environmental issues in the city with our mission of cleaning up and greening up Pomona's industrial zones and neighborhoods. So we really, our first actions were really about industrial pollution and really focused on industrial pollution. We operated as kind of an informal organization for a number of years and then incorporated as a nonprofit in 2019. We are a women-led organization. I think we have 8 board members and 6 of them are women, including our president and vice president. And we've always been a women-led organization. And we have a total of 8 board members. We also made an effort a couple of years ago to become fully bilingual as an organization. We have 2 board members, including our vice president, who prefer to communicate in Spanish. And so we've made a policy to have all of our meetings bilingual, all of our internal communication bilingual, and a lot of the material we produce in English and Spanish as well. And we ask that our board members really have a strong connection to Pomona. Almost all of us live or work in Pomona or have daily connections to the city, have family, they grew up in Pomona, maybe they live, in a neighboring community now, but they're in Pomona on a daily basis, or their kids go to school in Pomona. And so we really try to be that kind of community-based organization. We have no employees also, I should mention. So we are a completely volunteer organization. And so our approach, what I want to talk about today in terms of our approach to advocacy and action, really is organized around sort of 4 key ideas about engaging and empowering communities, about learning, about being strategic, and about building power. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these components because they really, I think, encompass and describe our approach to the way in which we work in terms of advocating for change within our city. So the first one about engaging and empowering communities, which most community groups feel like they do, and we certainly try to center the voices and experiences of community members and really support their efforts to improve neighborhood parks and streets. So we really take what I call an asset-based approach of really thinking about getting people to think about how to build positive things within their community, not just address problems or challenges that they see. And so some of the examples of some of the things we've been involved with over the years is we hosted a number of workshops between 2017 and 2020 that we called Pomona Placemaking. We were one of a series of partner organizations, but I was the co-facilitator of these workshops. And so Clean and Green was really a lead role in this. And the idea was to really just bring community members together who were interested in advancing opportunities they saw in their neighborhoods, whether that was for pocket parks or for more trees or for some kind of event, an ice cream social type of event, or we had a car show that was developed and various other kinds of ideas. One of the projects that resulted was a community-built butterfly garden in one of our parks, and there's a photo there of folks doing that planting, all planned by community members, all funded by community members and donations that they sought, and really trying to empower them to see about positive change within their community. We've also been involved in climate resiliency surveys and workshops for young people. We've hosted a number of those over the last few years as we've looked at ways of strengthening climate resiliency with the city and really engaging with young people in the community. So we've designed interactive workshops that we've hosted on these activities as well. And then, of course, we have our volunteer tree planting, which is the way we've connected really with California Relief and this network. And this is a process whereby we, as a volunteer-based organization, volunteers are really the core of how we plant trees. So we'll host these volunteer planting days, typically bringing together on a typical Saturday 40 to 50 volunteers. We had one 3 weeks ago on March 16th that we actually had 72 volunteers at, almost all from Pomona. We get a few people from neighboring communities, but it is really very much people from the community, high school students from the community, the neighborhoods in which we plant, and really trying to get them to be invested in this process. And so this is something that we really started, not because we love trees, although we love trees, but we wanted to connect with communities we were not connecting with prior to that. And so by doing this kind of action within their neighborhoods, within parks, or right now we're doing pretty much only street trees over the last few years. And so we're walking neighborhoods and encouraging participation and talking to people and building networks and connections with community members, all to thinking about ways of this kind of approach to engagement and empowerment. The second thing that I mentioned in terms of our approach is that we really try to instill this idea of being a learning organization within our group. So we really try to embrace a learning mindset, and we study issues that impact our community and learn from the expertise that we have within our group, or drawing expertise from others. And a lot of it is collecting our own data. And an example of that is a number of years ago, we worked with Pomona Unified School District to eliminate the use of diesel buses within their schools. And when we were looking at that, we saw that there was an opportunity. We knew that they had a bus contract. They didn't own a lot of equipment. So we thought there was some opportunity for them to think about alternative vehicles. We knew that most of the buses they used were smaller buses for special education. And so we knew that they didn't necessarily need hydrogen or electricity, but gasoline might be an option as opposed to diesel in terms of improving air quality. And so, we met with them, and the first thing that we were told by the school district was, oh, we don't use diesel buses. And we've got a couple of teachers on our board. We knew that they were using diesel buses, but they basically said, we're not using any, thanks for visiting with us. But, and so what we decided we needed to do was collect our own data. So we did a series of observations. We visited 23 school sites at drop-off time, sitting out there with cups of coffee. And the great thing is, by federal law, the buses have to label what kind of fuel they use. So we could really easily document and through photographs and other kinds of things. And we discovered that 88% of the buses they were using were diesel. So then we were able to bring that information back to another meeting with the superintendent, and the conversation went very different. And actually was very, very successful in eliminating that back in 2014. We had a similar type of thing when we were working on impacts of waste and recycling facilities. The city was telling us they didn't have that many within the city. There wasn't like we had a disproportionate amount. We went on and documented 22 of these, basically driving the streets and collecting the information. A lot of these facilities are listed on their business license as just being importers and exporters, but what they're really doing is importing and exporting waste. And so we were able to, bring that information in. And so this kind of learning mindset is the type of thing that we really try to focus on. And it's led to some interesting studies, one of which we recently completed is what we call the Tree Planting Priority Index. And when we were involved in the tree planting, working with the city, we discovered that they really didn't have much of a process for prioritizing where to plant. It was really based on where they were hearing requests from the neighborhoods, which tended to be the neighborhoods that already had some trees and wanted more trees. And there were whole portions of the city that weren't really participating in that process. And so we wanted to try to figure out a way we could be a little bit more strategic in asking, instead of how can we evenly distribute trees across the city, where can we focus our efforts to have the greatest impact in improving environmental quality? So we put together a model that looked at a number of factors, that looked at some of the environmental burden that different neighborhoods were experiencing in terms of pollution effects, looked at the lack of green assets, what we call green deficits in terms of the existing tree canopy, park acreage, those kinds of things, and looked at some of the demographic challenges like poverty and the presence of youth and elderly populations. And so, we're able to combine all this information together, kind of in the same way Cal EnviroScreen, a very similar kind of model, but really focused on sort of the needs we have of looking at tree planting priority. And, the result is this model. And again, this report's on our website for you to take a look at if you're interested. But what we revealed was really, 7 neighborhoods highlighted in red here that we thought, were the areas where we wanted to focus first and really think about how do we bring resources into these areas. We recognize that the entire city has a lack of tree canopy, lack of sufficient tree canopy, but we really want to try to be mindful in thinking about how to prioritize these where we can have the greatest impact. And so this has been useful for us as we work on identifying where we're planting in conjunction with the city. So the third thing that we talk about is this idea of being strategic, proactive, and solution-oriented. So we spend a lot of time speaking in front of city council and in front of the planning commission about various kinds of issues. And one of the things we try not to do is not just go there with a problem that we have and expect the leaders to address it in some way that we're going to be happy with. Rather, what we do is, we bring in evidence, we frame the problem, and we offer solutions that we believe are feasible for decision makers. So one example of that was a few years ago, we were working on reducing truck routes. We were hearing a lot of folks, and we knew because we live in the city that trucks were driving all over the city, not just within our industrial areas. And when we started to look into that situation, we discovered that the truck routes had been designated in 1959 and had never been updated since then. And basically at that time, they just said all the major roads are truck routes. And so you can see that there was, like on that top image there, a large connection of roads, including through the middle of our city where our central business district is. And we knew a lot of communities really, other than deliveries, really ban, trucks from passing through their central business districts. And so we put together a proposal, and you can see that what was adopted in 2019 is largely the map we put together. And so instead of just asking them to reduce truck routes, we came to them with a proposal of how we'd like to reduce the truck routes. And we often find that as a result of that kind of process, we're ahead of where city staff are. We often know more about these issues than city staff does. And so it really helps us frame the situation. We've also been, in recent years, been focused on parks and open space. And one of the things we worked to do back in 2022, I believe, is when we were successful in completing it, was raise our park impact fees that developers pay when they build new building units. We discovered that those had not been raised since 1989. And so we worked to raise those up to contemporary standards in line with other communities. And again, we offered really concrete solutions about how to do that. And then the other example I want to show you is this kids-friendly Pomona park system, where, when we developed and were successful in raising the park impact fees, we really pushed the city to develop a parks master plan. We did not have a parks master plan. And the city agreed to do that, but has been very slow to act. In addition, we participated in some of their community engagement. We felt like it was really missing and not significantly asking for input from the community. And our work in things we've done like placemaking and the climate change action workshops and the tree planting outreach felt we gave us a lot of insight into what the community interests and the community concerns were with regards to parks. And so one of the things when we felt like this was not moving along as fast as we would have hoped, we made the strategic decision to develop our own vision for the parks plan and publish it and put it out there in advance of the city's draft. And the idea with that was, we wanted, when the council members are considering the parks master plan, we want them to be thinking in their minds, how does this compare to what Clean and Green Pomona developed? How does it compare to the kid-friendly Pomona park system that they developed? And so we put together a 2-page concept And this is on our website, just a simple concept, 2-page, both in Spanish and English, that outlined kind of the issues and opportunities that we saw with regards to the park systems, the need for more parkland, the need for addressing maintenance issues in our existing park system. And then it laid out a vision for what this potentially could look like. And again, the intention of this is to inform really the parks master plan that's being developed. And we offered, 5 basic goals of increasing park acreage to a standard of 4 acres per 1,000. Right now we have like 1.25 acres per 1,000 people. We wanted to provide a park or green connection within a 1/4 mile of every home. And one of the key things we propose for that, as you'll see on that diagram, is what we call the green tapestry, of really looking at these streets that really created and extended the concept of a park into many neighborhoods. And we think that there's, space to do that, and we think there's opportunities to do that. Certainly a goal of enhancing existing parks and activating those parks through expanded programming. And then the other thing we've been calling for is the reestablishment of a Parks and Recreation Department. This is something that went away a couple of years ago, and we think that it's important for the city to bring that back. So, not only did we offer sort of that graphic, but we actually offered sort of tangible policies of how each of these goals could be achieved. And so, we're really trying to lay this out and really trying to influence that parks master plan. And I think we're being successful in doing this, although they're still not done with that parks master plan. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is this idea of building power to influence change. We recognize that understanding and building power is really the key to influencing pro-environmental and pro-social change. And so we work to build relationships with allies. We've got a number of organizations, ICON, Conexión de Padres, and other partners that have been vital in pushing for change with us, going as a coalition to really push for change, and really engaging elected officials and support staff. So not just showing up at public comment at the council meetings, but one-on-one meetings with these officials, really trying to raise awareness of them. And one of the things we implemented this year, because we've noticed that there's a lot of hidden power within communities that is influencing communities through campaign donations or through other kinds of lobbying efforts. We've actually taken on and have been doing local campaign transparency, of publishing campaign donations so that voters have an opportunity to take a look at that and understand who's supporting, which candidates. So we're trying to make all of that information visible, because we know that power really matters. And we really learned the importance of that building power really early on. I mentioned that waste transfer station fight that really gave rise to Clean and Green Pomona. I mean, it was a situation where literally hundreds of community members turned out at the council meeting to oppose that waste transfer station. And yet in the face of all of that, it was still approved. And so, in looking at that, we knew that, the proponents of those projects had been working years in advance to cultivate the support among the city council, and that, excuse me, community opinion was really no match for that at this time. So in our first few years, we really struggled to gain support for the work we were doing. And we discovered that, if the existing power structure was to remain, the existing officials were to remain in power, we were going to be really limited in what we were able to accomplish. So we made a controversial choice of working to transform that leadership. And so we did a couple of things. We did that in a couple of ways. One is we cultivated good candidates who shared our values. So as an organization, we didn't endorse these candidates, but many of us might work in our private time to support these candidates. Our current mayor, Tim Sandoval, was a board member of Clean and Green Pomona, an original board member of us in 2012. He made the decision to step off and run for mayor. And of course, we knew that was somebody who would share our values. And so really trying to cultivate those kind of candidates. We actually have 2 former Clean and Green members that are on the city council, the mayor and council member Garcia. And so cultivating that kind of leadership is important. And then the other thing is like really exposing conflicts of interest and poor decision making by current office holders. Holding them accountable is something that we spend a lot of time doing. And so voters really helped in this process. So the 5 people who supported the waste transfer station, 4 years later, by 2016, none of them were in office. 4 of them, I think, had been defeated. 1 of them decided not to run again. And so there were some real ramifications of that decision. And, in contrast to previously, we've got really strong working relationships with the majority of the council now. And so we've got the ability to reach out to them, offer counsel to them and input. And so, that's something we decided to do that we thought was important in terms of really being influential. And so I'll just wrap it up there, and happy to take questions. And the only other thing I'll mention, just as a little plug for my university and my work in the department here, is that in particular the tree planting priority index, the kid-friendly Pomona park system, those types of projects are the exact kind of projects I work on with my students all the time. We're always looking for community partners, whether it's nonprofits or government agencies. And so if folks are interested in your communities in those types of projects or similar things you think that might be similar, I'd love to certainly talk to you about the possibilities of getting support from Cal Poly Pomona to do some of that work. So that's just that kind of shameless plug there. But now I'll turn it back to Megan if you want to facilitate questions or.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. So if you do have a question, you're welcome to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, raise your hand and unmute yourself, and then ask your questions that way. So we'll give folks a second. Does anybody have any questions? Well, I have a question. Well, I'll just start it out. So some of these reports are very detailed, and you're an all volunteer run organization. Just for an example, for your kid-friendly 2-page report, it's an incredible amount of work to summarize in 2 pages, number 1. But 2, as a working group, is it your board? Is it multiple workshop groups with the community that put together something like? How long did it take you, and what did the dynamics look like to create something like that?
Yeah. Well, it is definitely a collaborative and a group effort. We typically will have like subgroups. So I mentioned we have 8 board members, but we also have a number of other folks who are involved that do not participate on the board, but might participate in particular actions or work. And so we typically, for an initiative we'll typically have a subgroup that will be formed that will be kind of spearheading that effort. The park system was something we started looking at parks and open space around 2018. When we started looking at the impact fee and those kinds of things. It also, we draw up on expertise within our group. And in that particular case, me being, a faculty member in landscape architecture, park system planning is something I teach. And so, there is some knowledge within the group about how to do that type of thing. But in other areas, we're all learning, at the same time, and we're trying to figure out, it's really that learning organization mindset of how do we, get information, learn information, research information, come together, share that information within the group, talk about what we think might be possible with it, and really do that kind of collaborative thing. And I think, for us, these are, as I mentioned, we're all really connected on daily life to Pomona. And so we all care about it. And so for us, the other thing, we all really like each other. So it's a good time to get together and do that kind of work, but it is a lot of work, but we're able to make it work somehow.
Okay, so I've got questions in the chat, but I'm going to start with the folks with their hands up. I saw your hand up first, so I'll let you go first. You can unmute yourself.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Great presentation, and it's really remarkable how much you all are getting done with a handful of folks, it seems. Which kind of begs the question: do you have staff or hope to grow in that direction in the future? And then, kind of as a follow-up, I know there's a lot of funding out there for tree planting these days, especially CAL FIRE funding earmarked for, you know, cities and regions that that have those high Cal virus screen scores and DAC communities and the like. How, you know, tree people, I think, got 6 million recently for Inland Empire tree planting. Sustainable Claremont and others in the region are doing tree planting. How could organizations like that, my organization, Council for Watershed Health, we're more involved in stormwater, but there may be some opportunity for working more closely with you all. How can we engage? So yeah, kind of where are you guys going as an organization, and how can we better engage with you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. You know, we do not have any staff, and that's a conscious decision on our part to not want to go there. You know, as like an all volunteer board, we've decided that, you know, we're going to set some parameters on what we're trying to accomplish. We like the community based mindset that we have in terms of the screening we do for our board members. And so we don't have any plans to grow in that way in the future. I think we recognize that limits our capacity in some respects. And that to us is a little bit of a trade-off in terms of making sure it keeps focused on the things we really want to do rather than managing personnel. We're spending our time working on the things that we really want to work on. And I think the other thing is that it you know, while it does limit some of the things we can do, I think at the same time it also allows us to really live into our values in a really strong way. So we're not always concerned about, you know, needing to meet payroll and needing to pursue grant opportunities for the need to bring resources into the organization. It's really about, you know, what work do we want to do and how do we fund and support that. So that's, you know, that's what I'll say about that. In terms of the, you know, the collaboration, I think, you know, there's always those opportunities and we're always interested. I think one of the things we're mindful of is our community-based mindset. And, you know, I'll be honest with you in terms of, you know, partners, and we have partnered with folks, but we're kind of tough on our partners in terms of asking the questions of, you know, how well are you connected to the issues in Pomona? How well are you going to relate and connect to the community in Pomona? What are your plans to do that? And so those are, you know, issues that, you know, we like to work through with partners in a pretty detailed way before we, you know, just engage them because they've got the ability to plant a large number of trees or something like that. So,
thanks for that, Carl.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go next to, like I said, we'll go to our folks with hands up, and then I'll go back to the chat. Jeff, do you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Carl. It was an excellent presentation. I am a treasurer and a board member of a Meadowview Urban Tree Project. Meadowview is a neighborhood in Sacramento, and we're trying to improve the tree canopy in Meadowview and in South Sacramento in general. We're 100% volunteer as well. So I did leave my chat message to you because I would like to talk to you offline to kind of see what your experience is like. But my particular question is regarding the school district. We've had some challenges engaging with the Sacramento Unified City School District. We have some more ideas on how we can do it better for their 24-25 school year. But I'm wondering what you can say on the record here, if you have any suggestions. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say off the record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, that's great. I'll be quite frank. You know, we've had our challenges working with our school district. You know, our initial tree plantings, which were all funded by I think all but, by the way, all but about 200 of those 1,500 trees we planted are funded by California Relief. So thank you, California Relief, for that. But our first grants were planting about 400 trees on elementary school sites within the city. And we had a good partnership going in terms of that effort. One of the things we've been frustrated by is the stewardship and the maintenance of those. A lot of those trees, the reality is a lot of them have been removed by the school district. And we've worked with them to try to address that issue and have been frustrated by that. But that in part was one of the reasons we made a shift to beginning to work with the city of Pomona much more on the tree plantings, working on the parks and on the streetscapes. And so, they've been good about, us getting access to do workshops on climate change action and things like that. And for us, what I've found for those kind of things is I tend to work much more directly with principals and with teachers than I do the administration. And that's a way in which we've been able to get access and work with those. You have to work with the administration when you want to plant trees on their site. And that's where we've run into just some difficulty, some dysfunction in our view in terms of the way that organization's run. So I can empathize with your struggle. That's definitely something we've experienced as well.
Thank you for your comment.
No.
We'll go to Doug Thomas and then to B. Newell. Doug, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks for the presentation, Kyle. I just had a question about the placemaking workshops you were talking about. And I was just curious, in terms of outreach to get people to those workshops, how did you go about that?
Yeah, that's definitely the challenge, right? So the first thing was we built a pretty broad coalition. So I mentioned I was one of the co-facilitators. Another colleague of mine, Bree Shea and Ainsley Brown, were co-facilitators. And we reached out to organizations we knew and said, would you be willing to sponsor this? And really by sponsor it, we just wanted them to tell people about it, And so trying to build a network of like-minded groups that have their own networks that they could reach out to was part of what we did there. We also rotated like where those workshops were held. I mentioned, I think we held a total of 17. Some of those were in, city buildings, community centers. A lot of those were in churches or faith-based organizations. Temple Beth Israel hosted one. And so, one of the things when an organization hosted us, we really encouraged them to invite their community and try to get their community to come out. And so it was really through that kind of word of mouth thing. And I will tell you, we had about, I think the max we had in terms of a workshop, at one point we had 70 show up to one of the workshops. I'd say like 25 to 30 was more typical. And one of the things that struck me was like the regulars that showed up every time. Like of those 25 to 30, probably 20 to 25 of them were regulars that would come almost every time. And one of the things that I grew to appreciate was that the act of actually holding those workshops was a form of placemaking. That it wasn't so much about building the butterfly garden or these kind of things. These folks wanted to come together and talk about their community, talk about possibilities in their community, and see each other and socialize on these Saturday mornings that we held these. And so, I felt really good about that as an effort. That it kind of it died out because of COVID, and then we just got busy and haven't picked it back up again, although we talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
B, would you like to ask your question? Go ahead.
Yes, I have two quick questions. First of all, once you plant the trees in the median strip or the sidewalk strip, does the city care for them?
Sort of.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an ongoing issue, right? And one of the things we've been interested in as we've looked at other grant opportunities, because as a small organization, we're kind of limited in the size of grant we can really go for and manage. And one of our goals has been, how can we build more capacity within the city to do some of this? Because they've really kind of relied on us in recent years to be the primary tree planter, and other groups. Sustainable Claremont's done planting in the city before as well. And their crew has been pretty minimal. And we've been really pushing them to pursue grant opportunities that would build greater capacity. And so not just for planting trees, but also for maintaining those trees. So, we for a couple of years, depending on how long our grant lasts, we make an effort to provide some supplemental watering and some of those kind of things, again, through our volunteer efforts. We do a lot of outreach to residents about taking care of the trees in front of their homes and so forth as best we can. but that's definitely an ongoing challenge. And one of the things we regularly hear, if we hear folks that don't want trees when we go out and aren't happy about us planting trees on their street, the most common thing I probably hear is the city doesn't take care of that.
Right.
And you probably hear that as well, would be my guess. And so, you know, that's an ongoing challenge for us, like I think it is for a lot of organizations.
Okay, I'll just ask the second. I have a lot to say about that issue, but the second question I will ask is, what is the age of your, I'm a retired professor also, so you're lucky you have a pool of relatively older volunteers. You have college age students that you can appeal to help. What is the age, the lowest age limit of the volunteer that you use to plant trees?
Yeah, we have young people come out and plant with us.
How young?
We've had families come out with groups of, maybe 8-year-old, 10-year-old. We've had Girl Scouts that have come out. One of the, so when we started tree planting, one of our concerns was getting volunteers, right? As it is with a lot of people. I leaned heavily on my college network, right? Fraternities from my campus to come out and plant the first couple of years, and they were great at that. Over time, we've gotten off that, and actually very few of my college students come out and plant with us. Maybe, we'll maybe see a couple on a volunteer planting day. The majority of our volunteers are high school students.
Ours too.
So the AVID programs and some of these that really encourage community service,
Right.
We're able to offer that community service opportunity. And we will get, like I mentioned, the 70 folks we had on March 16th that were out planting, 72, and I would say probably 40 of them were high school students. And so that is an age that we really utilize, and I'm pleased that we're utilizing those high school students from Pomona now rather than the college students that are just coming in, because we really wanted to try to be as community based as possible.
That's what we use too, but we can't use anybody under 15 unless their parent is with them. So
okay, yeah, we've been able, in talking with our insurers and stuff, we've been able to do that. So we do get, they do need parental permission to participate,
Right,
but we've been able to.
Okay,
still do that.
thank you. That's same.
Okay, so I've got some questions in the chat. I'll share with you. One person asked about under the 5013 status and how that may impact your ability to do some political action. And so, do you want to speak a little bit to that about what you have discussed as an organization that you want to do, especially on the educational component?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and the 501c3 is something we're definitely aware of and cognizant of. And so, our organization doesn't spend any resources on particular candidates or any of that kind of advocacy of electing particular candidates. Our organization does not endorse any candidates. We do not provide any of that kind of support. As individual residents, many of us choose to participate and work on campaigns for individuals, but we're doing that as individuals, not as the organization. And so, we're very clear about those separations. Where I often hear, folks' hesitancy sometimes that are with 501c3s is, there is definitely a mindset that folks need to be mindful of, if your candidates are unsuccessful and you were really, pushing for those candidates, does that make it difficult for you to work with the people that were elected instead? And that is, definitely a risk that folks want to think through in terms of their ability to work with, all sorts of folks that may get elected. But we've decided that is, something in terms of advancing our agendas. We're aggressive about it in terms of that effort, but you won't see any endorsements from our organization or any money from our organization going to any candidates.
Thank you for that. Another question we had in the chat was about watering specifically. What strategies do you use? You mentioned with some of your relief grants and maybe working on some city-led plants. How do you approach watering? Do you do that with volunteers? Are there agencies you work with to ensure that the trees are being watered, especially during our extreme heat events that are happening more frequently and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a challenge with the street trees. It's not with the trees in the parks or the schools. That was pretty well handled by irrigation that exists and so forth. But the street trees, that's definitely an ongoing challenge. We work with the city in terms of the watering, primarily to utilize their equipment, right? They've got the watering trucks that we can utilize to access that. And so, we do the monitoring of saying, well, we need to really water this street. Can we work with you to do that? And we'll bring a volunteer crew to help them do that in conjunction with the city. So city's been really good about offering that kind of in-kind support for that kind of watering that we need to have done. But our mortality rate is higher on streets than it is on in parks and schools, and a big part of that is access to water. So we also work to try to get as many residents as possible. According to our city code, residents are responsible for doing that kind of watering, but of course that isn't something that's enforced. And so we try to do that through education. I know we've had blocks where we planted where individuals have taken on the responsibility of providing supplemental water and carrying buckets to water their neighbors' trees and so forth. And we definitely support that, but we don't have any kind of organized effort to recruit those kind of block captains. Maybe we should do that.
That's actually a really interesting idea of a concept. Another question in the chat, Kyle, is what have you found most effective or inspiring, what have you found most effective for helping inspire homeowners to plant trees, maybe in their front yard? And is there any suggestions you have to help people overcome the objectives, especially in what you referenced earlier about the maintenance side of things? I assume that there isn't a fee associated with your tree planting, so that's not necessarily an issue. But if you could speak to any ways that you've surveyed folks to find out what those objectives are in advance, how do you approach that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't have any magic solutions to those. I mean, we face those same challenges as I think you all do. We've not done any of those kind of surveys. I know there's literature out there that I've read, about sort of people's attitudes towards trees and some of their concerns about them. And I think communication is the primary means by which we try to do that. And so, and to the extent that, it helps that, we are neighbors coming and speaking to neighbors, community members coming and speaking to community members. I think that helps. We always do that in a bilingual way. So we have English and Spanish available to talk to folks about the opportunities and concerns. And we definitely, I have a lot of conversations as we go through the process of, walking the streets and then marking the locations and then, people, having concerns. And I have a lot of those conversations about people trying to address kind of what their concerns are about the trees, and in much the same way I'm sure you all do. And sometimes I'm successful and oftentimes I'm not, and there's still that kind of resistance. And so that's just one of the ongoing challenges we have. But I'd love to learn from others if folks have other ideas about how to do that, because that's an ongoing challenge for us.
Craig, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, because I had put that question in the chat. And thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Megan. What percent roughly would you say of when you encounter these objections, what percent do buy in? And I absolutely agree that creating awareness, I like to call it planting idea seeds that eventually will produce a tree. But what positive response rate have you found generally? And I know it depends on many factors.
It does, right? So we planted on Saturday. We planted a two-block stretch that had, I think, 51 trees in it. Pretty long blocks. And I think I had, if I remember correctly, I had conversations with 3 or 4 people on there about concerns about the trees. And I think there were 4, if I remember correctly. I was successful in getting them to receive the trees 1 of those 4 times. And I guess that works out to 25%, but I don't think it's anywhere near 25%. I think it's probably lower than that. But I haven't looked at that. It's a small amount. And of course, as you all know, the frustrating thing is the vast majority of the people are thrilled and really happy to have the trees, but we tend to deal and spend all our times with the ones that are unhappy. And so it makes you feel a little bit like, what's this community thinking? But it's really just a handful of people that have some of those concerns.
Kyle, and Josh, you have got an additional question. You can unmute yourself.
Just a comment on that last topic. We've done a lot of neighborhood polling and talking to neighbors about trees. And one of their major concerns about planting trees is the roots going into the driveways, the sidewalks, and their houses. And one way that we help them with that is, first of all, we advise them to pick trees that are less likely to be spread. And we also very strongly encourage them to be watering the trees according to best practices over the first 3 years and thereafter, because if a tree is not getting watered, obviously it's going to look for water. And we've had a couple of people that I could see, maybe they knew that they weren't taking care of their first trees or something like that. And they seem to feel more comfortable with those two points made to them. So I just wanted to pass that along since Kyle asked for information on that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. The other thing I'll add is, one of the things we try to do is, as we're doing this, and this is where some of our connections to elected officials come in. I mean, we have, like I mentioned, the strong relationship we've got with the majority of the council. I think 6 out of the 7 council members, the mayor and the other council members, have come out and planted with us multiple times. So they're regularly participating. They're very supportive of what we're doing. One of the things we do, and this happened this last tree planting we had, is if there are issues on the street, we identify those and report those, and we actually work with the elected officials to make sure those get paid attention to and get addressed. And so we had one part of the block, there was one area where a tree that was in somebody's front yard had lifted up the sidewalk to a point where it was really, really hazardous. And so we reported that and got that repaired within a week. We had another situation where another stretch, somebody had carved a hate symbol within the sidewalk, and we reported that and got that addressed at the same time. And by reporting, I mean, I called the mayor and told the mayor about those situations and said, if there's anything you could do, that would be great. And they were able to get that done. I think, the residents had probably reported those things through the normal channels and had been unsuccessful in getting those things addressed. And so you're trying to build that kind of credibility with the community by helping them to address some of those issues. We also regularly, part of our volunteers will do street cleanup, not just tree planting. So they'll be picking up trash or other kinds of things to kind of make sure we're leaving the neighborhood in better shape than it was when we arrived.